What is up, Buckeye Nation? Floco here from Ohio State Football with Scarlet and Great right here on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel. We are asking for all your love and support as you usually give us. We appreciate it, guys. With me today, Dylan Freeman, our X's and O's expert, a scout. He's just been all over the spectrum with regard to college football. And we're going to talk about, well, first of all, Ohio State obviously losing by 1 point to Georgia in the Peach Bowl. And then tonight we just witnessed losing to another number one team in another sport in basketball by less than 3 points. So, been a rough week if you're an Ohio State fan. Can we agree with that, Dylan?
Yeah, that might be the worst week stretch I've ever seen. Like the loss to Georgia was probably the worst that I've experienced.
Oh, well, that was obvious. It's a regular season game. Will be a throwaway game come 2 months from now. But Georgia loss obviously was, a chance to play for the national title against a team we would probably beat in TCU. And I'm not trying to disrespect
favored
TCU.
by probably 10.
I think we'd beat. Yeah, I think the national title game will be proven to have been played, on December 31st at 8 p.m. But that's whatever. It is what it is. It's over now. But we're gonna dissect it a little bit as to what happened. Specifically today, we're gonna talk about the secondary a little bit because we were having an interesting conversation in the group chat about the secondary. And I'll tell you, Dylan, I was immediately talking to friends who know coaches and college football and things like that, and they all said the same thing. That secondary play was horrendous. It was just really, really, really bad. Dylan, what just overall impression? What happened?
We saw against Michigan when we finally get against light or close to like athletes, our secondary gets exposed. Last year was more on the corners that were getting exposed. And this year it was more on the safeties. We don't really have safeties that are designed to play in coverage and in space. They're designed to be in the run support and filling gaps. And unfortunately, it's great against teams that don't have the athletes to test it. That's why early on in the year, teams like Wisconsin, Michigan State, and a few other teams of that nature, when they wanted to run all the time, they worked no problem because Hickman could fill and then Ransom could fill. And that's just against, you saw with 4-3 wide receivers and even Ladd McConkey injured. I mean, he's still a very good player. And then we had to divert extra resources to bracket some of the tight ends. So it was really a lot of leaving guys on islands, or even not necessarily on islands, but cover one. But we're somewhat limited in what we can actually run this year. So from all the way from Knowles not having his full playbook, I mean, they talked about it throughout the year. His whole playbook is almost empty, things like that. It might be as far as the scheme, but the actual cover, we ran very few coverages this year. And so that's really, but unfortunately you can't do that without safeties that can cover.
Now this is interesting you bring that up. Okay, real quick before we move on, J Book was holding a Spaces event session for Ohio State fans, right? And I got in there and listened. I didn't speak, but I was listening, and people were griping that, why is Tim Walton the corners coach and Eliano the safeties coach when Eliano coached guys like Sauce Gardner, who's, might be defensive rookie of the year in the NFL. He's a technician. And they say, well, Eliano's a technician coach. He's such a great coach. And I thought to myself, well, as vital as it is for the safeties in Knowles' system, but wouldn't it make sense that you have your best cover coach coaching safeties are going to have to cover in an island, because offenses are so good at isolating safeties these days, and you have to keep the safeties on the field because you got to defend against the run at all times as well. So it makes sense to me to have your best cover teacher to teach these safeties how to cover in one-on-one situations.
Kind of like we talked about, it's the term safety-driven defense. I mean, they say that for a reason, because in our defense, obviously there's good and bads of every type of defense. Ours is we expect you to cover in space one-on-one, and then we also expect you to play in the run and be very heavily involved in the run game and run support. So it is tough. I personally, when they're first announcing the staff, I would have liked to seen Eliano at corners coach, but he's been in the secondary before. It's not just been corners. And so, but at the same time, like I said, we ask a lot of cover safety. Do you consider McCallister a safety? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
we teach him a lot of cover techniques. He's in the safety room quite a bit as well as a cornerback. So, I mean, if you have him in the safety room, you're still needing that important coach. And I think out of the two, Eliano is the strongest of the coaches as far as who I would rather have on staff teaching the game and aspects of coverage as well as the run support. And so I think from that end, Eliano is a better coach. And so I don't really see it. I can see where people are coming from, though, with having Eliano move to corners, which I initially thought was probably the best idea.
I got you. Okay. Well, I mean, so that begs the question: what could have been done differently in these last couple of games? Do you think? I mean, there's some people questioning Jim Knowles, and I do too, actually. As far as late in the game when we were, ahead by 2 scores, we went aggressive in our coverage, or at least aggressive on the line. We were running man press coverage, obviously, and it just, Lathan Ransom falls on his butt, and then of course Tanner McCallister gets beat in the seam, and Denzel Burke doesn't even turn around looking, and gets beat in the end zone. But what do you think should have been done differently? Because I felt like, to me, neither one of them, the press coverage or the zone, were working perfectly at the time. But maybe you want to have them burn clock to score instead of, just score on one play.
That's the thing. So in the first half, they were moving the ball at will on us. They were running and passing. And a lot of people see that the Ransom, like you saw in our group chat, I was as pissed as anyone at Ransom man coverage on that wide receiver. However, you also mentioned a few minutes ago, teams are so good at isolating based on strengths of your formation, where you're lining up your safeties, and because they all manipulate formations now with motion. I mean, that's just the easiest way to tell what you're doing. And if you look at the series before, when they scored that quick touchdown, when they beat Burke, half the plays over the middle were zone coverage, and they were giving up chunk yardage on that. So, I mean, I think you saw a stat on our group chat as well, and I was posting on Twitter of targeting Tommy Eichenberg in coverage. I mean, that's just one of the vulnerabilities in Tampa 2 and cover 2 defenses is that middle of the field, and especially when you have tight ends that can cover, it's limiting on what you can do. So, I mean, I get the point that they were thinking that we could go to zone coverage and kill the clock, and I think we could have definitely done that. But at the same time, we ran man coverage, and we got, I think, 5 or 6 3-and-outs in that fourth quarter, in that second half, which we didn't do the whole first half. So if we get one more stop there, we get the ball back,
probably win the game.
Yeah. So, I mean, so all it takes is one more stop right there. And do you want to go out and prevent defense, or do you want to try
That's the thing. If he would have gotten a prevent type of zone soft defense, they go down and score on us, so people are complaining anyway, So it's
I wish we would have probably gone cover 2 and let them try beating us that way, but they proved they were. So, you know what I mean? So
and you open up opportunities for Brock Bowers to beat you. And imagine at the end of the game, Brock Bowers is beating you in the cover 2, and it's just like, how did you not cover that guy? It's just a danged if you do, danged if you don't situation, really.
Yeah, and I mean, like I was talking about earlier, our safeties aren't good enough in zone coverage.
Hickman and Ransom are not great coverage safeties, but again, I'm going to go ahead and go into this. Do you think it's more the scheme or the talent we have? Because I still maintain Jim Knowles inherited a cultural mess on defense, and he's trying to fix it. And I still maintain that the guys that have been recruited obviously do not fit his scheme. And I hate this. I hate this when people say, well, you got to fit your scheme to the personnel. Well, we're trying to create a teaching of a new scheme. You can't go one way this whole year and then the guys you got next year start teaching your other scheme. You got to start year after year after year. That's how these guys get better at it.
You can't just do half and half. I mean, your scheme versus something else to fit the players. I mean, you tailor your play calling and personnel groupings and things like that to scheme, but you can't just tailor your scheme to what the talent you have there. I mean, it just doesn't work. I mean, we saw Urban Meyer's scheme with Haskins. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work. Like, you have pieces, but at the end of the day, I mean, I don't think Jim Knowles called a perfect game. And
he didn't.
I'm a big fan of Knowles, but I think that, I mean, Hickman's a glorified linebacker is essentially what he is. That's what he was last year too. I think he's a good player in the box, and that's what we asked a lot of our safeties. But when we actually got against teams that had like athletes and we put them in space, they can't hold up. And same with Ransom. He did a pretty good job on Bowers throughout the game, but we also bracketed and took away help over the middle of the defense. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit of both. We could I personally would think that running a lot more cover 4, which would allow our safeties to trigger into the run support more, would have been a helpful thing. And was still keeping them in cover 2 shell. However, I just don't think that our safeties were good enough at the end of the day to play man, even if it's cover 1, but you're still in man coverage. And we saw them get abused in cover 2. So, I mean, there's really not much you could do when your safety is your last line of defense. They're still getting beat no matter what you do with them.
So after this game, I know a lot of people are starting to question Jim Knowles. I actually got in arguments with people, friends of mine, who just say they want him fired after the last couple of games. I think that is absurdly ridiculous. I mean, just ridiculous. If you're doubting Knowles, I get it. If you want him fired, that's after 1 year. What are you going to do? Just keep firing guys until you finally somehow hit on one? I mean, this is idiotic. And but let me ask you. You've liked Knowles from the beginning. We've talked about it. Do you still believe in him after this last couple games?
Yeah, I do. I mean, like I said, I don't think he called a perfect game the last 2 games, and I think I would have changed a lot of things. But I was watching quite a bit of film and like all 22, where you can actually see if some of the actual plays break down and kind of formations and things like that. There's a lot he can't do cover and call right now, and that really limits what you can actually run. And in the day, our goal, Jim Knowles' goal is to disguise, right? Like you have to be good, just good enough in coverage to do that. But if you can't do that, no amount of disguise, which is his specialty, is going to make up for the lack of coverage. We played half this year with one healthy cornerback. You know what I mean?
Cam Brown was out for much of the year. Denzel Burke has been the only one that's been kind of healthy the entire year, it seems like.
He's been out practice for like 5 weeks all year. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I know. Jair Brown got injured at one point, I think. It's just even the freshmen were everybody's getting injured. You're right. And J.K. Johnson, for whatever reason, we just stopped playing him after a while. He wasn't necessarily great when he did play, but I would say who was that great, you know.
Jair had beat him out by the end of the year.
Yeah. And they were saying, even David Biddle commented Jair was going to beat him out for next year. And that's why JK's in the portal. We wish him the best, of course, and wherever he lands. But look at this. I mean, we're talking about, I'm going back to the scheme or talent thing. 4 of Kerry Combs' defensive backs that he recruited are in the transfer portal, and they've left already. I think it's kind of where weeding out what won't work, you know, in that room. But I think next year's secondary has a chance to be pretty good. Do you think it can be better? Because I'm looking at that roster. I'm like Denzel Burke, who still, you know, showed flashes towards the end of the season getting better. He had up and down year, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But you got Jordan Hancock, who is a highly rated recruit, just a beast of a recruit. I mean, you got guys like Calvin Simpson-Hunt coming in, Jermaine Matthews coming in. You still have Jair Brown, who's there and played well when he did play. At safety, you got Kai Stokes. I don't know if Proctor's coming back or not. I don't know. Who knows?
He's not going to be back.
Hickman's gone, but you'll have Ransom, you know. You'll have Ransom, Stokes, Sonny Styles. You'll have obviously Malik Hartford coming in as a freshman who's exactly. Kourt Williams will be back from injury. I think the secondary actually has potential to be pretty good next year.
I do too, and I think it'll be. The thing is, Ransom is not. He played a lot near the line of scrimmage at the end of the year, and even though we were talking about his coverage and being last line defense, he was boom or bust quite a bit this year. He just didn't trust his eyes, unfortunately, and I think that his role next year will be the adjuster, which is pretty much the deep safety, which is where Hickman played this year. And because if you watch the the Peach Bowl, you saw that he missed quite a few tackles on running backs.
Apparently, according to the ratings, nobody watched the Rose Bowl. So
yeah, I didn't really watch much of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Ransom as a deep safety is fine. Who do you think who plays up in that box? Kourt Williams maybe, or do you think it's going to be Styles or Carter? I mean, who's Carter's going to be that cover safety? Am I right?
Yeah. So the good thing about next year's secondary, which is let's go back to this year when they went Proctor. He's the same player as Hickman, more or less. You know what I mean? He's more athletic than Hickman, but they're both linebackers. I mean, undersized linebackers.
Proctor always did shine near the box. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you have two safeties, two pretty much linebackers right there, and Ransom, who is pretty good at everything. You know what I mean? Not great at one area, but pretty good at a lot of areas. That doesn't leave you much versatility, and once you can actually run on the back end. I mean, if you look at Carter, he's right around 205 pounds. You have Ransom back again, who's right around 205 pounds.
Carter, by the way, looks extremely athletic. I noticed some film of him. I was like, wow, that guy is actually fast and athletic.
He's pretty good in coverage, too. Like, that's one of his strengths. And then, I mean, obviously, Sonny Styles will be, I think, who is going to start. But he's a little bit, obviously, a different breed as far as build-wise.
Huge safety.
Yeah, but, I mean, those other two guys, they're interchangeable. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the defense, I mean, if you look at the Oklahoma State secondary when Knowles, his last year, they were all right around 6 foot, 205 pounds, 215, you know what I mean? Like right around that same build. And it allows you to be very versatile. And, a look that we saw early in the year with the three safeties deep. And you can't really tell who's coming or if they're going to drop into zone coverage or cover three or cover, you know what I mean? So like there's a lot of versatility. And that's kind of what I think going to be better next year is just a lot of versatility in the defense as opposed to being limited in what you can actually run.
Plus a second year just teaching
Knowles.
These guys. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that's got to get better, right? It's just, I get people being upset with the defense against George. I get it, but I agree to sum up what we're saying here is he can't use his whole playbook. To me, it's like trying to run the run and gun offense with JT Barrett, as your quarterback. And I'm not knocking JT. I love JT Barrett, but we all know he wasn't, a guy you just put in shotgun and let him pick you apart. That's not what he was. So I think Knowles being limited in what he could do with his scheme, with the talent that he had on the roster. And I hate the people say, well, these are 4-star guys. That does not matter all the time. If they don't fit what you want to do, it doesn't matter if they're a high 4-star or not.
And I like Hickman. I think he's a good player,
Yeah.
And then we had him in the box a lot, which is where his strength is. You know what I mean? Like, so he was good at that. And Knowles, like we're talking about, Knowles did tailor his personnel to the talent that he has around him. That doesn't mean that you can't get better players for your scheme.
Yeah, and give him a couple years to do it, for crying out loud. I mean, it's just. I mean, think about it. The situation. Dave Biddle made a great point. He says we had to bring in Tanner McCallister, who was an average player. Not great, not special, but he's a nice player. He's average, but he had to bring him in to solidify that cover safety spot because we have no one else on the roster that even fits that role. I mean, Cam Martinez kind of, but we saw what happened when he gets on the field. So
he wasn't ready. Yeah, he's a year away from being able to actually contribute here at cover safety. And so, I mean, who else do you put there?
Exactly.
And
exactly, that's the point. The roster was not set for that.
And usually, you can put in a cornerback there. At times to get away with it, but we didn't have 3 healthy cornerbacks so that you can put in there and waste one. You know what I mean? So like it's
not even through training camp. We couldn't even train a guy to play that spot. So
I think kind of like you're going back to the transfer. I think Jensen Dunn's going to be a good player, right? Somewhere else, but I mean he's coming off his bad injury. You know what I mean? So like and then Stokes, we saw what happened when he was deep early on in the year as a freshman. He gave up that touchdown against Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there's really no win spot right there for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that was Knowles' biggest concern throughout camp when he talked in interviews. He says the depth to our secondary is just not good right now because we were constantly injured. It just is what it is, guys. And I think people need to relax just a little bit, give them another year. If we have the same results next year, I'd say we start asking questions and asking hard questions. But right now, it's year one. They did improve. And I'm sick of people saying it doesn't matter what you do against the Indianas. Yeah, tell me the linebacker play didn't improve. Are you kidding me? Are you out of you have to be bonkers to think that. So I think he did the best with what he could. I'm not saying he did everything perfectly. He didn't. But again, let him grow and learn what the personnel he has and let him get the guys he needs in there right now. We're getting some help coming forward with Malik Hartford, Jermaine Matthews. So Calvin Simpson-Hunt looks first day. He looks like a guy who's going to play right away.
Yeah, when he was committed to Texas Tech, our staff thought he was the best corner in the country. Even when we had Dijon, and we were still chasing a couple other big fish, like we thought he was the best corner in the country at the time, even when he was just a low three-star recruit from Texas Tech.
Exactly. So I feel good about the future, and I think guys I understand we're still upset about the loss, but let's just move forward and be encouraged by the fact that they fought their tails off in that game. I mean, it was a hard game against a great program and a great team with a great coaching staff, and they never gave up. They constantly battled and punched back. That encourages me for the future. Dylan, real quick before we head out here, did that game at least inspire you that we can wake up and fight back in these games?
Yeah, I mean, so I've struggled with my thoughts on Day throughout the year. It was more of not necessarily even him as the head coach. It's more of his role in the offense, which I think he has a brilliant offense mind, and I don't think I've ever wavered on that aspect. But I think it's more of the fact that he was too involved in the offense, and there's so much more going on. I mean, we have a dedicated special teams coach, but I mean, you saw Kirby Smart call the timeout. You know what I mean? Like if he was focused on special teams too, you know what I mean? Like so there's so many different aspects that you have to worry about. Even defense, like just personnel groupings. Like even though that you let your Jim Knowles is kind of the head coach of the defense, you're still involved in that. You know what I mean? And you can't do that at all when you're
your
worried
name
about
on the WL column. You know.
And you can't worry about, I mean, you can't focus on that when you're worried about what you're going to call on 3rd and 6 next possession. You know what I mean? Like there's so much more that he has to do than that he can't really do successfully with going with what he has to do with day-to-day operations as far as play calling.
Well, he is talking about giving up play calling. We'll see what happens there, who he fills Kevin Wilson's role with. I still maintain it'll be Justin Fry and then Brian Hartline as co-offensive coordinators. So we'll see what happens there. Dylan, I appreciate you. Tell them where they could find you, man.
At Dylan Freeman VP on Twitter.
Yeah, he's a good conversationalist guy. He's great with football. I love talking football. My buddy Dylan here. Dylan, we appreciate you coming on, brother.
Kourt, thanks for having me.
Yep, absolutely, guys. As always, guys, goodbye. God bless. And, of course, no matter what happens, win or lose, go Bucks. Absolutely.